This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
All right. Well, welcome to the what will be the July 20th edition of the Let the Record Show. We're taping here today on July 17th. I'm Eric Levine, and with me today is my good friend and co-host, Jesse Garcia, the chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee and the deputy chair of the New York State Republican Committee. Our anchor and fearless leader, Judge Richard Weinberg, is out sick today. We wish him a speedy recovery, and we look forward to having him back on the show next week. So we're going to start off today talking about, I guess, the topic most on everyone's mind here in New York City is the mayor's race, and which we currently have well-known communist and Jew hater Zohran Mamdani. And then we have a team of four others, former Governor Cuomo, Mayor Adams, Curtis Sliwa, and the other person whose name I always forget.
The voters.
And now everybody has to make their decision and figure out what they want to do. With us today to help make sense of some of this is Jim Thompson. Jim is the former director of the RNC Victory Fund, the political director of the state party, and is currently now a partner at a lobbying firm in D.C. and Albany. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Nice to talk to you today. And Chairman Garcia, always a pleasure to speak with you.
So I think one of the big developments in terms of the race, speaking a little more globally about the Democratic Party, is Ken Martin, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, recently declared that Mr. Mamdani and his team of folks and wing of the party are now part of the official tent and now officially part of the Democratic Party. As he has said it, we have conservative Democrats, although we can't name any. We have centrist Democrats, although we can't name any. We have labor progressives like me, and we have this new brand of Democrat, which is the leftist, which of course includes Mr. Mamdani and the acolytes of AOC and the Squad. Where do you see the party, the New York City Democratic Party, the New York State Democratic Party, and the National Democratic Party? Where do you see the state of that party as we currently see it?
Well, I think the data shows is that the Democratic Party is going through a crisis of identity right now. And, my grandmother was a Roosevelt Republican and turned into a a Roosevelt Democrat and turned into a Kennedy Democrat. And it's very hard to find those folks because they became Reagan Republicans. And if you look at the voter segments and what happened in the presidential election with President Trump and Kamala Harris, President Trump outperformed Kamala Harris in every election district across the country comparative to the Biden 2020 race. And that's almost impossible to do. And you saw upticks in African-American voters for the president, Hispanic voters, Asian voters, and certainly Jewish voters, which you touched on. And some of the rhetoric coming from the left comes off as anti-Semitic and very hateful. And a lot of those voter segments that they've taken for granted over the past, couple generations are starting to say, hey, you're not doing right by me with education in urban settings. You're not doing right by me with quality of life issues. And now they're trying to come up with all these platforms on how to talk to men and trying to swear more and be tougher. And it's not sincere in their approach. And I think that's why they're having such struggles on trying to navigate the Republican brand, who is not certainly popular across the nation and across voter segments. But you certainly see that they're struggling to message to working class voters across the country.
Well, one of the things I find particularly disturbing, though, is you have a guy who professes communism, who says that the state should control the means of production. As we know from Karl Marx and Das Kapital, that is the definition of communism. We have a guy who says that he wants to globalize the intifada. To everyone in the world who hears that term understands it means kill Jews wherever they are. What I can't seem to get my arms around is why Ken Martin would want to embrace that group and say they're part of our coalition, a part of the Democratic Big Tent. I mean, these represent some of the most dangerous and hateful ideologies of the 20th century. So we have a guy who's embracing Joseph Stalin economic policies, Mao's educational policies, and when it comes to the Jews, Hitler's social policies. And I just wonder if it had been any other ethnic group other than Jews, whether or not they'd all be embracing this guy and saying, let's make him part of the Big Tent. So it's kind of odd to me that rather I would have expected they'd say, we don't want you, get out, you're hateful. But instead they're just part of a big hug.
Well, and I would characterize it different. I don't think it's a big hug. I think it's for survival of their party, because they need most of the younger, affluent voters in their coalition subscribe to a lot of these beliefs. And if you saw the way the primary shook down in New York City with the voter segments breaking out that way, you looked at more traditional Democrats of African Americans and Hispanics voting for Andrew Cuomo, obviously not enough of them, and then you saw very affluent, gentrified areas of the city coming out in droves for the Democratic candidate. And again, if you have this kind of energy in the organization of the Working Families Party and the Democratic Socialist or what have you, whatever amalgamation they're using right now, the fact is they're very energized. You saw that across the primaries in upstate New York and Albany and Buffalo, the left of center candidates won. One was an open race in Albany, the state's capital, and in Buffalo, the second largest city, the incumbent mayor got beat by a candidate that was left of them. So you have a situation where in primaries, and this is how Bill de Blasio became mayor, you had somebody run to the left, and this guy makes Bill de Blasio look like a conservative.
Yeah.
The guy ran to the left, was not the most competent manager in New York City. He's an extremely competent manager, and he became mayor of New York City because of the multiple candidate primary in New York City.
Yeah, so really what you're saying is, so in the last century, 20th century, millions of people died. Americans, just people, but around the globe, millions of people died fighting the Nazis and fighting communism, the Soviet Union. And yet, now, this is the ideology that you are saying is dominating the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party relies on people who believes that these ideologies that used to be considered evil are now mainstreamed, are being given a new life in the modern Democratic Party. And they're being embraced. And it seems to be either people who are supportive, who actually full-throated support of these dangerous ideologies, or cowards and morally bankrupt individuals like Chuck Schumer, who are incapable of speaking out against them. So is that really what the Democratic Party has turned into?
Well, the Democratic Party isn't asking me what they turned into, but for my opinion, and with Chuck Schumer, and in a couple of years, he probably could be facing a very tough primary opponent from that left side of his party. Make no mistake about it. I mean, you hear all the rumblings about AOC taking him on and things of that nature. And again, as a Republican operative and somebody that, does better in his lobbying career because Republicans get elected, if they want to get rid of Chuck Schumer as their leader, minority or majority, hopefully a minority, good. If AOC wants to take that job and take that mantle, and Bernie Sanders wants to be the leader of the party, Me and
He already
Chairman
is.
Garcia are going to be very, very happy men.
Yeah, no, Bernie Sanders is certainly the intellectual leader of this party.
That's scary.
Anyway, Jesse.
Yeah, Jim, it's great to be with you. Eric, thank you for opening up the show. From my perch, though, I mean, I understand that Martin has opened up and said he's opened up to DNC. Honestly, from my perch and from the perch of unaffiliated voters and moderate voters, this is more of a complete surrender by the Democratic Party and a hostage takeover by the communist social Democrats that have now invaded the Democratic Party. Jim, I understand what you're saying about the energy that some of the working families people bring and the demographics, along with the Democratic Socialist groups that have now taken over the state party and really now the national party. I mean, think about it. Just earlier this week, they were falling on top of each other, having a breakfast for Monbami and endorsement after endorsement. He was being embraced by the national figures of the Democratic Party. So right now, what we always knew is that the Democrats stand. Mamdani is the face of this party, the new fresh face of this party, which is pro-criminal, pro-communist, pro-anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Jew, anti-cop, and anti-prosecutor. That's what they stand for right now. I mean, and honestly, I think you're going to see Chuck Schumer. And one of the reasons why we're going to see it's taking some time for Chuck Schumer to maybe have his meeting with Bombani for the endorsement to come out is because that meeting, I wish I could be there, because he's going to cut a deal to make sure he does not get a primary from the DSA, the Democratic Socialist Party members, when he comes up in 2028. But as we see this now to a political spectrum, and I feel horrible for my friends that live and work and have businesses in the city of New York if this keeps going forward. But Jim, I have two questions for you. You first as the political director, and I want to thank you because when I became chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee, you were one of the first people that I dealt with that helped me, understand the resources and the needs and the abilities of the New York State Party to assist us in rebuilding here in Suffolk County. But two questions. First and foremost, there is 5 candidates. Cuomo is already making a disaster of his campaign with, cheesy type of creepy commercials, and he's being attacked on all fronts for those commercials. He's staying into his race. And, of course, Adams now is outraising both Cuomo and Bombani in this quarter.
Combined.
But what function, how can we get a Sliwa to get out of this race or a Cuomo to get out of it? How do we pare down this in reality, in real practical terms? How do we pare down this candidate pool so it's a one-on-one against either an Adams, either a Sliwa, or either a Cuomo?
I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I'm not very optimistic that we're going to be able to get anybody out of the race. There's way too much bravado from the candidates, and I know President Trump and his very capable team were trying to talk to some folks about getting them to coalesce behind Eric Adams and whatnot, and I just don't see it happening. Andrew Cuomo had his shot in the Democratic primary. And his campaign, and you started hearing grumblings about 2.5 weeks out that things were starting to fall apart. And organizationally, they just weren't what they implied that they were. Because everybody thought that Andrew Cuomo, all the smart money in New York City, thought Andrew Cuomo was going to cruise. And obviously that did not take place. And the defeat was even bigger than what most people thought, 2 weeks out. So I think it's going to be a 5-way race with the 4 major candidates, and ballot construction is very important. Chairman Garcia, you remember when there was an independence party in the state of New York that was so vital to our candidates and stuff. And so now you have candidates that are going to be spending money on independent lines, not the independence party, but independent lines that are going to be able to get a message out. And we're talking about very small voter segments because you're talking about pluralities of an election because of the multiple candidacies instead of a one-on-one race where you need 50 plus 1. And again, that's how Bill de Blasio won the Democratic primary. And this is how somebody's going to win the general election in New York City. And this is not ranked choice voting in the general election like it is in the primary and special elections. So this is a much different animal. And I think Adams is going to continue to fundraise at a ferocious level. But the fact is, all the institutional Democrats, you pointed out, like the teachers union and organized labor and all those organization and money, are starting to get behind Mamdani. And that's a very dangerous prospect for the people that live in New York City and trying to do business there. Because, and Chairman Garcia, you got to be worried about this, because if the out-migration continues in New York City and the quality of life and the business climate continue to deteriorate, you're going to have more pressures on Nassau and Suffolk County and the Hudson Valley, Westchester, Orange, Rockland, Putnam, because you're going to have a lot of people going into the suburbs.
Well, that's assuming they stay in the state. I mean, part of the problem is a lot of the people are going to leave the state altogether.
That's a whole other issue. That's a whole other issue. You're absolutely right.
So once you do that, then that speaks statewide. When you have a statewide election, the people that would vote Republican or centrist Democrat, those people are gone. It becomes a death spiral.
We faced that in the Zeldin race 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, where a large preponderance of out-migration were moderate to conservative-leaning voters, whether they were Republican or unaffiliated, that left for other regions of the area. Now, you mentioned about how the state apparatus now is coalescing behind Mamdani right now, probably for their own self-preservation here. So he is the face of the Democratic Party. He is the face of the Democratic Party, and it's my understanding that just this week, Governor Hochul endorsed him. So now this is going to be interesting. We know that Republicans are outnumbered by about 8 million votes in registration, though unaffiliated voters are a large segment, a critical segment in any type of statewide election. Let's now take this state to the next level, into the 2026 gubernatorial race and the midterm elections. Let's stick with the gubernatorial race. Obviously, you got to think that Hochul's endorsement is to insulate herself from a primary, from the DSA and the Democratic Socialists.
But she already has a primary coming.
Exactly.
I mean, her lieutenant governor already has basically announced that he's running for governor. Richie Torres put out a
backing of this energized group, or not having that backing of that energized group would play a role in the success of that primary.
She didn't have a choice. To your point, Chairman, she didn't have a choice, because an Irish Catholic from Buffalo that became governor because Andrew Cuomo fell under scandal. She beat Zeldin because, to your point, 1 million of our friends moved out of this state that voted our way. If we had the same voters that were in the Pataki election in 2002, Lee Zeldin would be governor and not the administrator of the EPA. But that's not the reality. And we all know so many people that live in the great states of Florida, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, because of this tax structure and the quality of life and the way they live in freedom in those situations, whether it's school choice or whether it's just quality of life and safety issues, and obviously tax policy is a big one. So this is a real problem in New York that the governor has to address. And I think you saw her in front of the congressional committee with Congresswoman Stefanik, Congressman Langworthy, and Congressman Lawler, really holding her feet to the fire about the quality of life in New York City, particularly the subway and the safety issues of all the illegal immigrants that were here and causing serious violent crime and not working with the officials at the federal level. And I don't know who was telling her to take part in those hearings or what have you, but that was not a great look. That could be used in a Democratic primary, and that certainly could be used in a general election, because it just did not seem like she was prepared for the onslaught that she was going to be facing. And two of those people mentioned could be potential challenges to her.
Well, what makes this worse in terms of the Hochul primary, remember, she's making these grand gestures. Oh, if you want to raise taxes, or if Mr. Mamdani wants to do X, Y, and Z, he has to go through me. Look, first of all, the woman has the spine of a wet noodle. But putting that aside, once she's primaried from the left, If you are right, and I believe you are, that all the vitality in the Democratic Party is in the radical left-wing, communist, Jew-hating wing of the party, and then Mr. Mondani, if he's elected mayor, says to her, "You got to raise taxes," she won't be able to say no. If if he says to her, "You have to change MTA policy and allow the homeless people to live there," she won't be able to say no. So with all these people who are saying, well, if Mamdani's elected, it won't be so terrible because it requires the governor and the state legislature to pass some of these bills, in particular taxes, she's going to cave. He's going to get what he wants.
Yeah. I started in the New York State Legislature in 2003. The body of the Senate and the Assembly and the governorship has moved to the left dramatically. And I don't know if anybody's paying attention to what some of these legislative items are, and the climate goals and things like that. But it's right up Mondami's alley, and he's a member of the legislature currently. He's got relationships there.
Yeah.
And if he becomes the mayor of the most important city in America, he's going to leverage those relationships and leverage his cult of personality and the left-wing movement to get the things done that he wants to raise taxes on folks in New York City, to change the education policies, to reduce charter schools. That's very scary for a lot of folks in New York City that are trying to make ends meet and make a living while their quality of life deteriorates. I just think if you're an Asian American working really hard and trying to get a quality education, and you're getting bounced out of some of the merit-based charter schools and other institutions in New York City because diversity efforts, it's got to be very, very scary to be in that situation and, probably looking for greener pastures somewhere else. And that's a shame because New York City is the greatest city in the world. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm being told by Jim in the booth, Richard the booth, who controls all things, that we have to take a break. So, Jim, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. We'd love to have you back. This has been a great conversation. And
it would be an honor.
That'd be great.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, and we'll be back for the next segment of Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.